CEO called a single dad worthless. His hidden patent was worth $2 billion, they laughed, when Marcus Holt walked into the room. CEO Derek Calloway didn't even try to hide it. He leaned across the conference table toward his VP of Strategy, Brenda Fitch, just loud enough for the whole room to hear. "That's our candidate? I thought HR was sending us someone qualified." The boardroom of Callaway Capital sat 22 floors above downtown Chicago, all floor-to-ceiling glass and the kind of silence that money buys. Marcus stood in the doorway in a blazer that had been washed too many times, holding a manila folder and a travel coffee mug with a cartoon dinosaur on it, a gift from his 6-year-old daughter, Sophie. He'd forgotten to leave it in the car. Brenda Fitch pressed her lips together. Derek's COO, Roland Marsh, leaned back in his chair and pulled out his phone. 2 junior executives at the far end of the table exchanged a look. Marcus caught all of it. He set his folder on the table, set the dinosaur mug beside it, pulled out his chair and sat down. "Thank you for having me," he said. "I know you're busy. I won't take more than 20 minutes. Derek didn't even look up from his phone. "Make it 10. We've got a real meeting after this." What Derek Calloway didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the man sitting across from them had filed a patent 4 years ago that 3 of the Fortune 500 companies currently using their platform had been quietly infringing on. A patent worth, according to his attorney's most conservative estimate, just over $2 billion. They'd find out. But Marcus wasn't there to tell them. Not yet. 14 hours earlier, Marcus Holt had woken at 5:15 a.m. to the sound of Sophie coughing. He was up before his alarm, which he'd set for 5:30. That was how it had been since Claire died. His body relearned sleep as a luxury, something other people had, and settled instead into a permanent half-attention. One ear always turned toward the room down the hall. He crossed the apartment in socks, pushed open Sophie's door. She'd kicked her blanket to the floor. He picked it up, tucked it back around her shoulders, checked her forehead with the back of his hand. Warm, but not fever warm. Just a cold. Third one this winter. He stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her breathe. The apartment was small. He'd known smaller before, college apartments with 4 people and 1 working burner, but this felt smaller because of everything that wasn't in it anymore. Claire's half of the closet was still a third full. He couldn't bring himself to donate the rest. Not yet. Sophie asked about it sometimes, why some of Mommy's clothes were still there. He told her Mommy would have wanted Sophie to be the one to decide when they were ready. Sophie had thought about this for a while and said not yet. He'd said okay. He showered quickly, made Sophie's lunch, turkey on whole wheat, the crusts cut off, a note tucked inside, "Love you, Bug. Tonight we're making tacos. You pick the toppings." He set the bag on the counter, started coffee, and opened his laptop at the kitchen table. The Callaway Capital interview had come through a contact, a friend from his old life, someone who knew what Marcus used to do and had quietly put his name forward. Marcus had taken the meeting because Sophie needed new shoes and the freelance consulting work had slowed down, and the patent royalties, though real, were tied up in a legal process that moved the way legal processes do, slowly, invisibly, with no regard for grocery bills. He reviewed his folder in the gray pre-dawn light. His resume, his references, his proposed framework for what Callaway's mid-market division was missing, and he knew exactly what it was missing, because he'd built a company that solved that exact problem. Once, before Claire got sick and everything restructured around her survival, and then, when survival wasn't possible, around Sophie's. He closed the laptop at 6:40, got Sophie up for school. made her scrambled eggs with the little bit of cheese she liked. Watched her eat with one leg tucked under her, still half asleep, her hair in two uneven pigtails because he was still learning how to do pigtails. "You have a meeting today, Daddy?" "Yeah, bug. A job interview. Will they like you?" He looked at her. "I'm not sure, but I'll be fine either way." She nodded seriously. "You should show them the dinosaur mug. People always like you more when they see you have it." He laughed, a real one, the kind that surprised him when it happened. "I'll think about it." He dropped her at school, shook hands with her teacher, drove back through traffic, changed into the Blazer, found the dinosaur mug in the cabinet, and for reasons he didn't fully examine, put it in his bag. The conference room at Callaway Capital held 8 people. Marcus had expected maybe 3. Derek Callaway sat at the head of the table, early 50s, silver-templed, with the practiced ease of someone who had spent decades in rooms where everyone worked hard to make him comfortable. Brenda Fitch sat to his right, a VP of strategy who, Marcus would learn later, had been angling for the role he was interviewing for. On Derek's left, Roland Marsh, COO, who hadn't looked up from his phone since Marcus sat down. And then, at the far end of the table, almost an afterthought, a woman named Aditi Kapoor, the head of their IP compliance team, who had a yellow legal pad and was writing something when Marcus walked in. She looked up when he set down the dinosaur mug, looked at it for a moment, then looked at him, and something changed in her expression. Something subtle, almost a question. Marcus opened his folder. "I've done a brief analysis of your mid-market product funnel. You're leaving about 30% of potential conversion on the table at the third touch point. I can show you why, and where'd you work before this?" Derek interrupted. "I founded a company called Meridian Stack. We scaled to. Never heard of it." "That's fine. We were acquired in 2019 by—" "What are you doing now?" Marcus paused. "Consulting, some IP work." "IP work." Derek repeated the words the way some people repeat things they find slightly distasteful. "So, freelance, you're between things." "I'm selectively engaged," Marcus said. Derek glanced at Brenda. She pressed her lips together again. "And you think," Derek said, "you have something to offer Callaway Capital?" "I know I do," Marcus said. "I can show you in the next 8 minutes if you'll let me." Derek leaned back. "Go ahead. Impress us." He didn't sound like he expected to be impressed. Across the table, Aditi Kapoor had stopped writing. She was looking at Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read. What she knew, and what Marcus didn't know she knew, was that Aditi had spent the last 3 weeks auditing every third-party technology Callaway Capital's platform relied on. And 3 days ago, she had found something that had kept her awake every night since. She hadn't told Derek yet. She had been waiting for the right moment. The right moment, it turned out, was closer than she realized. Marcus's presentation took 9 minutes. He walked through the data calmly, without slides, using the whiteboard on the wall and a dry erase marker he found in the conference room tray. He drew 3 diagrams, cited 4 specific points of friction in Callaway's funnel that he'd identified from their publicly available analytics, and a product teardown he'd done at 2 a.m. While Sophie slept. He was 3 minutes in when Roland Marsh finally put down his phone. He was 6 minutes in when Brenda Fitch leaned forward slightly, her pen moving across her notepad. Derek Callaway remained still throughout. When Marcus finished, he let the silence sit for 3 seconds. "Then, it's fine. Surface-level stuff. Our team already knows most of this." "Your team knows the problem," Marcus said. "They don't know the solution. These aren't observations. They're executable fixes. I've done this before." The third-party stack your platform runs on, specifically the behavioral trigger layer, has a structural issue that predates your current engineering team. Derek's expression shifted slightly. Almost nothing. But Marcus had spent 20 years reading rooms. "How do you know about our stack?" Roland Marsh asked. First words he'd spoken. "I spent time with your public API documentation and a few things that are a little less public," Marcus said. "The behavioral trigger layer, the decision tree architecture, the handoff logic between your recommendation engine and your CRM." He paused. "I built something similar 6 years ago. There were problems with it. I fixed them. I filed a patent on the fix." Silence. Aditi Kapoor set down her pen. "A patent," Derek said flatly. "Yes, on what, specifically?" Marcus told him. The technical language took 30 seconds. He watched Derek's expression carefully as he spoke. Derek's face stayed neutral, but the color had shifted, very slightly, toward something less certain. "That's a pretty general claim," Derek said. "My attorney doesn't think so," Marcus said. "But that's a conversation for another day. I came here about the job. Would you like to keep talking about that?" Derek Kulesa looked at Brenda, looked at Roland. Roland's phone was on the table, face down. "I think," Derek said, "we've heard enough. We'll be in touch." He stood. It was a dismissal. Marcus nodded, picked up his folder, picked up his dinosaur mug. He was almost to the door when Derek said, "Listen," the word landed with a kind of deliberate weight. Marcus turned. "I appreciate you coming in. I do. But let me be honest with you, because I think it saves everyone time." Derek leaned one hand on the table. "We need someone senior here, someone current. Someone embedded in the industry right now, not someone who built something 6 years ago and has been doing," he made a small gesture, "freelance work since." He paused. "What you showed us today was competent." It was. But competent isn't what we need. We need exceptional. And I don't think you're bringing that to this table. He sat back down, as if the matter were settled. Marcus stood in the doorway. He thought about Sophie's pigtails this morning. Uneven, one higher than the other. He thought about the note in her lunchbox. He thought about the patent filing 4 years ago, in the middle of Claire's second round of treatment, when he'd been doing the work to keep them afloat and had never gotten around to making noise about it. He thought about his attorney's call last week, the one he hadn't returned yet. "I understand," Marcus said. "Thank you for your time." He walked to the elevator, pressed the button, stood there while it rose. Behind him, through the glass conference room walls, he could see Derek lean over to Brenda and say something. Brenda's shoulders shook once, a laugh she tried to conceal. The elevator arrived. Marcus stepped in. In his hand, the dinosaur mug. He sat in his car in the parking garage for 11 minutes without starting the engine. The city moved around him, tires on concrete somewhere above, the echo of something metal dropping 3 levels down. He set the dinosaur mug in the cup holder. Sophie had painted it herself at one of those ceramic painting places 2 summers ago with Claire. She'd painted it for him specifically, for Daddy's coffee, she'd told him when she gave it. "Because you always look like you need it." He'd used it every day since. He picked up his phone. 3 texts from his attorney, James Weller. 2 calls. A message from a number he didn't recognize with an Illinois area code. He called James. "Marcus, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you since, I know. I was in an interview. What's happening?" "We've gotten 3 responses. Formal letters." A pause, and in it, something that sounded almost like suppressed excitement. All 3 confirmed they've been using the architecture. 2 of them want to settle. One is pushing back, but their outside counsel flagged it to us privately. They'll settle too. Marcus was quiet. Are you hearing me? All three. That brings the floor value to approximately, I heard you, Marcus said, $2 billion. Conservatively, Marcus, this is okay? Okay? I tell you you're sitting on $2 billion and you say okay? I say okay because I need to think. He rubbed his face. Which three companies? James named them. Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. One of the three was a technology platform, a behavioral trigger layer used by dozens of enterprise clients, including, according to their publicly listed partnerships, including Callaway Capital. He sat with that for a moment. James, he said, I need you to pull everything on Callaway Capital's licensing agreements, specifically what they're paying for their behavioral analytics stack. I already pulled it. And they're using it. Has been for 14 months. No license agreement with you on file. Marcus looked up through the windshield at the gray concrete of the parking garage ceiling. He thought about Derek Callaway's face when he'd named the patent, that almost nothing shift. He thought about competent isn't what we need. He thought about Brenda Fitch's shoulders shaking. He said, give me a day. Marcus, one day, James, I need to think about how I want to do this. He hung up, sat in the car another 3 minutes, then started the engine. He had to pick Sophie up at 3:15. He was not going to miss it. He picked Sophie up at 3:15, as he always did. She came out of the school doors in her purple jacket, saw him at the curb, and her face opened the way it always did. Total and uncomplicated. The way only 6-year-olds manage. She ran, backpack bouncing. He caught her, lifted her, felt the weight of her small arms around his neck. How was the interview, Daddy? Fine. He put her down, took her hand, walked her to the car. How was school? We learned about caterpillars. Did you know they completely dissolve inside the cocoon before they become butterflies? Like their whole body becomes soup. I did know that. That's so weird. They have to become soup to get wings. She climbed into her car seat, thinking about it. I think that's kind of brave. He buckled her in, held onto the car door for a moment. Yeah, he said. I think so too. They made tacos. She picked all the toppings. Cheese, more cheese, a few pieces of corn, and something called purple stuff that turned out to be the cabbage he kept in the crisper. He let her stand on the step stool to help him with the cheese. She narrated everything she was doing like a cooking show host. He washed dishes and watched her and thought about James's call and Derek Callaway's face and the way Brenda Fitch had laughed. After Sophie was in bed, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and a cup of coffee, the dinosaur mug, and composed a very carefully worded email to his attorney. He was not angry. He'd understood for a long time that anger was expensive, the kind of thing that cost you more than whatever sparked it. What he was, instead, was clear. Clearer than he'd been in months. The path forward had been there. He'd been waiting for a reason to walk it. He pressed send. Closed the laptop. He did not sleep well. But he did sleep. The call came 48 hours later. Marcus was at the kitchen table with Sophie, helping her with a worksheet about 3-digit addition, when his phone lit up with an Illinois area code he'd come to recognize. Bug, can you give me a minute? He stepped into the hallway. Mr. Holt. The voice was careful, professional, and had something underneath it that was working hard not to be alarmed. This is Angela Reese, executive assistant to Derek Callaway at Callaway Capital. Mr. Callaway would like to schedule a follow-up conversation at your earliest convenience. Marcus leaned against the hallway wall. What changed? He asked. A pause. Mr. Calloway just wants to. Angela, quietly, what changed? Another pause. A longer one. We received correspondence from your legal team this morning, she said. Mr. Calloway would like to discuss. He glanced back through the doorway. Sophie was counting on her fingers, lips moving. Her worksheet had a sticker of a goldfish in the top corner. Her teacher gave those out for effort, not correctness. Tell Mr. Calloway I'm available Thursday afternoon, Marcus said. My office. I'm sorry, your office? I'll send the address. He hung up, went back to the kitchen table, sat down, helped Sophie carry the 12. She looked up at him. Was that the job people? Yeah, did they like you better now? He looked at her. At the goldfish sticker, at the purple jacket hanging by the door, at the dinosaur mug on the counter. They're starting to, he said. Thursday afternoon. Marcus's office. The office was modest, a co-working suite in the West Loop, the kind of place with glass walls and shared conference rooms and a coffee station in the lobby. He'd rented a private room for the meeting. He'd also, on James Weller's advice, had James present. Derek Calloway arrived with Brenda Fitch and a man Marcus didn't know, outside counsel. He guessed correctly within 30 seconds of their handshake. Roland Marsh was not there. Derek sat down across from Marcus and looked around the room, the spare desk, the single bookshelf, the window with its view of a parking structure, and Marcus watched him processing it, watched the quiet recalibration happening behind his eyes. Thank you for making time, Derek said. Of course. A pause. I'll be direct, Derek said. Your patent filing. Our legal team has reviewed it. We believe our licensing agreements cover. They don't, James said, calmly, from his end of the table. We've had 3 independent assessments. The architecture your platform uses, specifically the decision tree handoff layer, falls within the scope of Mr. Holt's 2019 filing. 14 months of unlicensed usage, conservatively valued at. I know what your valuation says. Derek's jaw was tight. Silence. Marcus looked at Derek Calloway. He thought about the conference room 22 floors up, the floor-to-ceiling glass, the careful kind of silence that money buys. He thought about competent isn't what we need. He thought about Brenda's shoulders shaking. He thought about Sophie saying, I think that's kind of brave. Derek, he said. Let me ask you something. When you walked into that interview room 2 days ago, when you saw me sitting there with my folder and my coffee mug, what did you think? Derek's jaw worked slightly. I thought you were underqualified, he said finally. Why? Because you presented that way. How should I have presented? You should have. Derek stopped. He looked at James, at his own outside counsel, back at Marcus. I don't see what this has to do with, you told me I was worthless, Marcus said. Evenly, not with heat, not in those words. But that was the message. He leaned forward slightly. I'm not telling you that to shame you. I'm telling you because I want to be clear about something. I didn't come to that meeting looking for your approval. I came because Sophie needed new shoes, and I thought it would be a reasonable use of an afternoon. The outside counsel shifted in his seat. What I actually have, Marcus continued, is a patent that is, by the most conservative estimate from 3 independent assessors, worth north of $2 billion in licensing claims. I have 3 settlements in progress and a 4th pending. Your company's usage represents a fraction of that. He paused. But I'm not interested in destroying Calloway Capital. I'm interested in a fair agreement. Derek stared at him. Brenda Fitch, for the first time in 2 meetings, did not press her lips together. She just sat there. What kind of agreement? Derek said. Licensing. retroactive and ongoing. Standard rate for the architecture type, plus a consulting engagement for the platform issues I identified, which are real, and your team knows they're real. He looked at Derek steadily. You can have the person who built this. Or you can spend the next 3 years in litigation and pay considerably more for considerably less. The outside counsel was already leaning toward Derek. Derek Calloway looked at Marcus for a long moment. Something happened in his face. Not remorse, exactly. More like the particular expression of a man who has just understood that the world is larger than his previous model of it. "Give us a moment," Derek said. Marcus stood, stepped outside, got a coffee from the lobby station. He stood at the window and watched a pigeon navigate the wind off the parking structure. 12 minutes later, James came out, and from his expression, Marcus knew. The agreement was signed 6 weeks later. It was a Thursday, the same day of the week as the co-working room meeting, which Marcus noticed and found vaguely satisfying. James had negotiated terms that Marcus would have called fair even without the leverage: retroactive licensing, an ongoing consulting agreement with Calloway Capital's product division, and a formal acknowledgement in the internal IP registry. He didn't ask for an apology. He didn't need one. What he'd wanted was an accurate picture of the situation, and the situation was now accurately reflected in the documents. He signed the last page and set down the pen. "How do you feel?" James asked. Marcus considered. "Like Sophie after the caterpillar lesson," he said. James gave him a look. "Soup to wings," Marcus said. "Don't worry about it." By Friday of that same week, Derek Calloway had called a company-wide meeting to announce a revised approach to external talent partnerships and to name a new VP of Strategic Partnerships, the role Marcus had originally been interviewed for, under a restructured title with a consulting arrangement rather than employment. He didn't take it. He had enough. What he heard secondhand from a contact in Calloway's HR department, who told a mutual friend, who mentioned it to James, was that Brenda Fitch had been reassigned from her VP role following an internal review that had nothing explicitly to do with the Marcus meeting and everything implicitly to do with it. Her signature was on the performance review framework that had generated Derek's dismissiveness in the first place. The committee found the framework inconsistent with the company's values toward external talent assessment. Brenda called Marcus's office once, left a message with his assistant saying she'd like to speak. He didn't call back. Some distances, once created, don't close. Roland Marsh, the COO who'd spent the interview on his phone, resigned 4 weeks after the agreement was signed. He sent Marcus a brief, correct LinkedIn connection request with a note that said only, "Congratulations on the outcome. Well deserved." Marcus accepted, wrote nothing back. Derek Calloway he would encounter twice more in professional settings over the following year. Both times, Derek shook his hand firmly and said things that were correct and entirely hollow. Marcus shook back, smiled, said the right things. He held no grudge. He also held no illusions. 3 months later, Marcus woke at 6:15, not 5:15. Sophie slept later now. Her cold had cleared, and she'd settled into a rhythm that let him have 1 more hour. He lay in the quiet for a moment before getting up. The apartment was the same size. The bills were current. Claire's side of the closet still had 1/3 of her things, and Sophie still hadn't said she was ready. Some things take exactly as long as they take. He made coffee, started on Sophie's lunch. Note inside, "Love you, bug. Piano lesson today, you've been practicing. I can tell." She'd started lessons 2 months ago. She was learning a simple version of something she'd heard somewhere and wanted to play. She practiced for 20 minutes every morning before school, in her pajamas, with complete seriousness. He stood in the doorway sometimes and just listened. She came down to breakfast with her hair brushed. She'd learned to do it herself recently and was very proud of this, and her backpack already on. "What time is it?" she asked. 6:45. "I have time to practice." She went to the piano before she'd taken off her backpack. He stood in the kitchen doorway with his coffee and listened to her work through the song. She made 2 mistakes. Went back. Fixed them. Made a different mistake. Went back. Fixed that one too. The dinosaur mug was warm in his hands. She looked up when she'd played it all the way through. "Was that good?" "Yeah," he said. "That was really good." She glowed, the way 6-year-olds do, total and uncomplicated. He drove her to school, shook hands with her teacher, drove back through traffic. Had 2 calls in the morning, one with James, one with a company in Seattle that had reached out through the licensing process with questions. Answered emails. Reviewed a contract. At noon, he made lunch and sat at the kitchen table. The same chair. The same window with its view of the building across the street. Everything the same. Everything different. He thought about Derek Calloway saying competent isn't what we need. He thought about the way the words had landed in the conference room, meant to diminish, absorbed instead like a weather event, something that happened, had its moment, and passed. He thought about Sophie on her step stool, narrating the taco making, purple stuff, more cheese. He thought about caterpillars, about soup, about wings. He finished his coffee, got back to work.